Good afternoon, everyone. Before we begin, I just want to let you know that this event is being recorded. So please mute your mic so as not to interrupt the discussion. But then I also understand if you prefer to keep your camera off. I do hope that you would, if you during the comments and questions section, you would consider putting on your camera to ask your question, just so that Samwel can see all the lovely faces that have joined us today and isn't just staring at avatars. Okay, so I think we're going to begin. Again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Anya Nyamjo, and I'm a Senior Research Officer at the Ethics Lab here at the University of Cape Town. Thank you so much for joining us for today's session. And I'm delighted that we are joined by Dr. Samwel Moses Ntapanta, who's an anthropologist, and his work examines the material, social, and moral worlds that emerge around discarded electronics and repair economies and informal technological infrastructures. He's also the author of Gathering Electronic Waste in Tanzania, and here he traces how people labor with and live alongside the toxic afterlives of global digital systems. And more recently, he has been developing what he calls the African triple frontier, where he looks at electronic waste, AI, and digital currencies as interconnected terrains of value, toxicity, and imagination. I'm very excited about Samuel's work because I think it offers us, at least it offers us an invitation to rethink the ethics of artificial intelligence from the ground up. And here we are sort of centering repair shops, salvage yards, and recycling hubs, where the material life of technology continues long after its innovation cycle has moved elsewhere. And so there's an important contrast here between AI ethics discussions that often begin with data, whether we're thinking about bias, transparency, fairness. And as much as these are important, we have an opportunity here to widen the frame by considering the material infrastructures that make AI possible, the planetary and ecological cost of deploying or developing AI, and also very importantly, the forms of labor and care that sustain technology long after formal systems abandon it. And even going deeper to think about the ethical reasoning embedded in the everyday practices of repair and salvaging. So, Samuel, thank you so much for joining us. We're very excited and looking forward to your contribution. Over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Nyamjo. Good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are. So when Dr. Nyamjo wrote to me and asked if I could present something in relation to electronic waste, not necessarily with the AI, was actually a good timing because I have a book club on Clubhouse where we meet several friends discussing, reading different books and discussing them. We have read from Ngugi wa Thiong'o's The Wizard of the Crow to Chinua Achebe and others. But the timing of Anya's request for me to talk today came exactly at really interesting point of our book club because we had just finished reading Scarcity Smart, The Future of AI, and how you can save the world by More Goodhart, and we were in the middle of reading The Coming Wave, Technology, Power, and the 21st Century Greatest Dilemma, written by the co-founder of DeepMind, Mustafa Suleyman. Though I was still in the earlier phases of thinking on how I can expand e-waste or find overlapping between electronic waste with AI and the project that I'm doing now on cryptocurrencies in Kenya. So it was a nice invitation for me to take time and think about this. Um, why there's been a lot of emphasis in the mainstream field of AI, especially on ethics that focus on issues of bias, fairness, transparency, and accountability. Also, there have been emerging scholarship on AI as it there's been increasingly shifting on scholarship on AI towards approaches that foregrounds its materiality, political economy, and planetary consequences. The emerging literature makes clear that AI is inseparable from extractive infrastructures, global labor regimes, and the toxic afterlives of digital AI digital hardware. And a few to mention, Benjamin Bratton, the book on the stack on software and sovereignty, but also the very recent 3 years old book by Kate Crawford on Atlas of AI, Power, Politics, and Planetary Costs of Artificial Intelligence. They are making this foundational literature that demonstrates how AI depends on extractive operations across mining in Africa, in Congo, in South Africa, in Madagascar, but also it is entangled with labor regimes, especially at the manufacturing phase, mainly in Asia, but also issues of datafication and cloud infrastructures on data center and their impact on energy. But however, there have been less and less on the afterlives of this materiality of AI. So I would like to start situating this discussion within the entanglement. Next slide, please, Annie. Sorry. Yeah, so I would like to begin by situating this discussion within the entanglement of what I call and I borrow it from Mustafa Suleiman, the coming waves, the dual coming waves of AI and e-waste. So we experience a rapid expansion of artificial intelligence and the equally rapid growth of electronic waste globally. These two waves so far has been a little bit treated separately. There have been less and less discussions on how these two waves overlaps, apart from a few literature from technology studies on talking the potential of AI in e-waste recycling, which I will discuss a little bit later. So the first wave, the AI wave, appears in the discussion mostly in the abstract and immaterial, and it is often described in terms of algorithms, models, data sets, or the socio-economical challenges of fairness, bias, and accountability. The second wave, e-waste, appears unapologetically material, discarded phones, broken laptops, obsolete servers, and the vast infrastructure skeleton of global techno capitalism. So, but when we view them together, there's a brutal and probably very dystopic political and ecological picture that emerges, one that makes visible that materiality of AI, the geographies through which it circulates, and the environmental and labor dynamics that are at stake. So I will talk about these two waves, and not necessarily one is the first and the other one is the second. I just name them the first and the second, but it's not that way. Can we move on the next slide? Yes. So on my talk this afternoon, or the discussion that I'm initiating here, I will I will talk through four main sections. If I have time, I hope I can finish all of them. So we'll talk about the coming waves, the AI and E-waves. I will bring a little bit some of my observations in Tanzania, the waves, how they emerge in Tanzania. And then I will talk about the potential of AI and in e-waste management and what it means from Africa, African countries. And very specifically, I'm using Tanzania as an example because I know African countries, they are also very diverse in terms of social, economic, also techno arrangement. And if I have time, I would really like to talk about AI and toxicity, how environmental harm, exposure to toxic compound, and the unequal burdens of toxicity. The next slide, please. The first wave. So Mustafa Suleiman, a co-founder of DeepMind, in his book, The Coming Wave, Technical Power and the 21st Century Greatest Dilemma, which he co-authored by Michael Bashkar, they argue that the world is entering a period of profound technological transformation driven by two converging forces, artificial intelligence and synthetic biology. They call this a transformation, the coming wave, a historical point in which increasingly capable, increasingly autonomous system will reshape economic, political, and ecological lives. For Suleiman and his co-author, the wave is defined not only by exponential improvement in computation and biological manipulation, but by the fact that these technologies becoming omni-user, omni-purpose, meaning that they will penetrate on every aspect of human activities and reorganize societies at unprecedented speed. So Suleiman described the coming wave as first accelerate faster than any prior industrial revolution invention. It permeates most of all sectors simultaneously. It generates destabilizing political, economic, and social effects, and actually it's able to escape a lot of traditional regulatory mechanisms. Although the coming wave offers one of the most important analysis of the transformative powers and systematic risks of artificial intelligence, Suleiman analysis contains a significant blind spot. He framed the wave almost entirely in terms of informational, political, and security dynamics, while largely ignore the very material infrastructures that make AI possible, particularly the environmental and toxic consequences of accelerated hardware turnover. His account on runway autonomy, misuse, and geopolitical instability, yet remains silent on issues regarding extractive and post-consumption dimension of AI. For example, mineral intensive that are, for example, used on a GPUs, a graphic processing unit, short-lived data center and servers, lithium batteries, and vast hardware ecosystems required to scale it. As a result, the book does not address how the coming wave will generate unmatched volume of electronic waste, nor how these discarded materials will disproportionately accumulate in the global south. Next slide, please. The second wave, which is e-waste, has been accelerating a little bit earlier than before the AI wave. So the global e-waste crisis is documented by e-waste Monitor that in 2024, the globe reached the volume of 62 million metric tons of electronics and is supposed to reach 82 million metric tons by 2030. And the Global E-Waste Monitor has been documenting this accumulation, or this wave of e-waste from 2010. So in 2010, globally, we produced 34 million metric tons. In 2019, 9 years later, it was 53.6 million metric tons. And in 2024, it was 62 million metric tons. And it is, and this we see is an increase of 82% from the levels of 2010 to 2024 within 14 years. But the e-waste wave did not just come, abrupt or at once. It was short. It came in short, small waves that actually we can go all the way back to see. But I'm looking on changes that has been happening in the electronic productions from 1980s. So we know in 1980s, the invention of personal computer, or the personal computers revolution, that we witnessed the mass adoption of desktop PC, monitors, keyboards, and other peripherals. And then there is the mobile phone revolution, which begins mid-1990s, 1995 to 2010, where we saw explosion and expanded of cheap feature mobile phones. While this was happening between the same years, 1990s to 2000s, we saw the digitization or electrification of the household. Here we see the booming of TVs, radios, which radios were already there, VCR, DVD players, stereos, microwave, all these and many other electronics in the household. And so we saw how the household was, changed from other technologies to be embedded into electronics infrastructures. But also, during the same period, we witnessed the rise of what is called planned obsolescence in the production of electronics. I will come to this later. But also, within the same period, there was a shift, for example, on television from cathode ray tubes, CRTs, to LCD and LED to OLED to QLED screens. And this switching from all these screens means more screens were casted out and become obsolete. But also what was very critical to, for example, LCD screens was the amount of mercury that was used in the backlights of these screens. So the when they become obsolete and not properly recycled or handled, we witness, the increase of mercury contamination, especially in areas like in Abogboish in Ghana or Guayu in China. But also between this period of 1990 to 2010, we also see the increasing fast processors in computers, which came together with intensive also planned obsolescence. This rapid changing in processors meant that the old hardware became slow and they had to be discarded. We saw this on computers, laptops, servers. During this period, they will be obsolete between 2 to 4 years. But also with the planned obsolescence, which mean to make things difficult to repair, whereby manufacturers instead instead of having soldered devices, they will use glue, they will use complex motherboards, they will glue behind the batteries, the situation we still have with mobile phones, that made it very difficult to repair. But also with the planned obsolescence, the increased propriety of through licenses and other infrastructures. And at this period, we witnessed in Europe a slow repairing knowledge and repairing practices disappearing. I will come back in Tanzania. Is another case. But also in 2000, also we start receiving a massive electronics, different types of electronics through from China, through global supplies, but also chip manufacturing. So the rise of China as a world's electronic factory made prices of electronics cheaper, and consumers could replace their devices frequently, but also the increase of counterfeit and low quality products that are actually dominating the electronic markets, at least in Tanzania. And then there was another wave which started from 2000 until now, which we call the rise of software-driven obsolescence. For those using different operating systems, we are very aware. For those using iOS, every couple of months or 1 year, there will be a new update, and the older devices will not be able to, for example, synchronize with the new updated apps. But also we know with Windows, at some point, I don't remember exactly which year, if you had Microsoft Word 2023, you could not, if you send a document, the other person could not open, or you could not open a Microsoft Word 2007. So these were all software driven planned obsolescence. And then, of course, we have the smartphone revolution from 2007 onwards, which also we witnessed the shift from feature phones. They become obsolete to more smartphones, including iPhones and Android. And all of the smartphone also carried all these planned obsolescence features. And the last would be the last small wave was the rise of consumer Internet of Things, or IoTs, and wearable. So between from 2010s, we start seeing, the coming of smartwatches, fitness trackers, smart home devices. These days you go to the door, you stand, they can see inside, or even if you're in the office, you can see who's on your door, light sensors and all that. So many of these small, and most of them are non-repairable devices, got into the market, and very quick, because of planned obsolescence, they become waste. So the AI wave now, not yet, but is coming to what they call the edge AI, where most of these things and many others will be integrated into the AI. And what will this mean? Will AI reduce rapid obsolescence? How will it expand? To what extent will it expand to everyday devices? And how will AI itself help with recycling? I will come to that in the next section. Next slide, please. So when we talk of Tanzania, which for several decades, from late 60s or 70s to 1990s, Tanzania was under socialism, which means there was really controlling on what people could consume. The liberalization that happened in early 1990s witnessed the Tanzanian government and the former President Mwinyi adopted what he called Luxa, like open idea for economic approach. During this time, we witnessed a lot of electronics coming to Tanzania. At this time, we are mainly used from Europe because China was not yet hitting the market until the 2000s. But also after many years of socialists, managing what people could consume, people really opened to have electronics as being part of modernity, but also aspiration to new technologies. Also, during this time, we witnessed the expansion of urban centers and also the rise of lower or middle income families, which now we are getting to the peak. So the growth of lower middle income class and small businesses expanded demand for household and personal electronics. So electronics in this period until now still is a mark of status, modernity, and participation in modern or urban life. So television, fridges, smartphones, and other household devices have permeated in most households in urban Tanzania. But also, as I've said, in this time, we witnessed the shift of the global trade and China become the primary producer or the primary source. So this increased affordability of electronics from China, lower costs, which broadened the access across class groups. And we witnessed a regular shipment, and I know some of my friends traveled to China to bring merchandise from China, and this created a steady supply chains of electronics. Nevertheless, second-hand electronics still coming in Tanzania, and the main shipments come from Europe, the Gulf, North America. And usually they come mixed, some functional, some repairable, and some of them are waste. But however, the second-hand market is still very stable in Tanzania, especially among the lower class households, with the belief, but also with the experience with the counterfeit Chinese product. So more low-income households prefer to have used, well-used electronics from the European market. So with all this, even though there's massive used electronics, which by the Basel Convention, we could categorize them as waste, but internally produced e-waste all over Africa has already surpassed of those imported. While the number of e-waste are increasing in Tanzania, the waste collection, infrastructures, and police are really lag behind. So in Dar es Salaam, where I conducted my field work, collection of electronic waste, but also usually mixed with scrap, mainly depending on informal collectors who walks around the city every day, and I did work with them for a year, whereby the collectors will buy defunct electronics from households, bring them to the workshops on the corners of Dar es Salaam, where they'll be salvaged. Repairers will come there to pick parts that they can still use to fix some of the broken electronics. Some will be metals like copper will be extracted there using, fire and burning. but also other materials will be transformed to other things. So the absence of e-waste collection, dismantling, and separation of metals that does not exist in Tanzania. Actually, there are only 7 registered. Last time I checked, only 7 registered recycling companies. However, they do not recycle. They just dismantle different parts and ship them out of the country. So cities like Dar es Salaam actually rely solely or mainly on informal networks of waste collection, recycling, and upcycling. Also,
Samwel, sorry, 8 more minutes.
8 more minutes. Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Next slides, please. So with all these problem, the increasing urbanization, relying on informal collection of waste, but also the change on demographic as the agrarian economies failing and the young people moving to cities, it's really difficult to formalize or even having a formal recycling a plant in Tanzania. Otherwise, it will have to coexist with this informal network. So a lot of proponents of AI and e-waste management argue that AI will enhance, a recycling of e-waste through, sorting, classification, providing passports for electronic devices that can be traced, mapped, and knowing where they are. While this will work in developed countries where already they have big companies monopolizing recycling, I think for countries like Tanzania, this will be very difficult as the informal young people with no jobs, and also they buy from households. So households does not have to pay to collectors. So this will make formal recycling, even if they will be AI driven, really difficult. But also when it comes to repairing of electronics, I think AI has potential for diagnosis, recovering where fault are, suggesting which components are failing, identifying safe ways of repairing electronics. But this will have to coexist with the huge infrastructures of repair in Tanzania, but also in many sub-Saharan Africa. And the problem with this, which I think we'll have to think very keen and see how things develop, because we already have experience of electronic manufacturing company controlling through proprietary repairing in Europe. So the question is, or how will it be when AI tools our accelerators are integrated into repairing of electronics? But the good thing is, I think I observed the repairers and how they learned really quick with the changes of all these technologies. I'm quite convinced they will be able to adopt this. Last slide. So I think one thing that is missing in the whole AI discussion is how AI actually will accelerate environmental harm or environmental injustice and an eco burden of this electronics, because as long as AI will depend on hardware, we still need batteries, lithium batteries. We still need brominate flame retardants, very important chemicals in electronics that control heat. We need persistent organic pollutants that are very central in the electronics. And the acceleration now, because if we go back to Mustafa's, the coming wave, this massive acceleration that we have not seen, which means more and more electronics will have to be discarded because the technology has moved so fast, while infrastructures for properly recycling are not there. And the last point is there is also limit of artificial intelligence. I think in response to toxicity, of course, AI will help in censoring or mapping or visualization of areas that these toxic compound are released, but it will not actually help, for example, workers to protect themselves. We can be able to monitor and visualize them, but how are we going to monitor? And second, AI will not be able to correct global waste inequalities. No machine learning model can actually challenge the coloniality and the political economy with the coloniality of global political economy and change that. And also the last one, the AI, I think will not be able to repair, I don't know if it's a good terminology, colonial supply chains, the mining that is happening in Africa, the labor outsourcing, but also planned obsolescence. I will stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Samuel. Yeah, so yeah, thank you so much. I think if I can just maybe offer a few reflections while I give our listeners time to maybe gather their thoughts, comments, questions. Um, and I think, yeah, I think given the way you position things at the beginning, I think, really um, call on us to rethink, some of the core assumptions around contemporary AI discourse. So whether that's assumptions about innovation, about progress. I mean, even the closing note that you ended on in terms of that sort of broader techno-solutionist paradigm in which, AI can be a potential solution to all and anything. But, I think you sort of pointed to some of the limits as to, can it protect the workers who are involved with, electronic waste management of its afterlives? Can it reduce global waste inequality, etc.? And yeah, and really just how might an ethics grounded in repair and endurance reshape the way we think about other responsibility, about accountability within global AI supply chains, as you sort of ended there. And so really, I think there's a lot of at least I found a lot of provocative questions that you were gesturing to, almost anticipating. I think, a lot of what your tone suggests that given the acceleration is the scale and speed, a lot of these effects we have to anticipate. And we have this sort of um, this history of technological development that sort of can anchor us in how we sort of anticipate what the future of AI development can look like. And so, really you're in that anticipatory tone, you're sort of inviting us to think about, what forms of labor make AI possible, but often remain invisible. Inviting us to think about what happens when technology breaks or travel or is abandoned, and specifically who encounters it when it is abandoned or breaks. And something that I think maybe you didn't get enough time to talk about, but maybe it's something that you might want to share with us is what alternative ethical vocabularies come into view when we are centering these practices of care, of repair, rather than say optimization or efficiency. Um, yeah, so thank you very much for that generous and thought-provoking presentation. So I would like to, I think before I, put together some of my own questions, maybe I'll open up to our audience if they've got any comments. Yeah.
Should I
Tiki?
respond to that? Oh, there's okay.
Yeah, Tiki? Over to you. You're muted.
Sorry, thank you. Sorry about that. We were muted, so I could not do much. So I'm Tiki Mapugata. I'm in the School of Public Health. Very interesting topic. I mean, from the first slide right up to the end, very impressive. So my question, Samwel, thank you for that, relates to the workers on the ground. I mean, we're talking about AI, which basically means that someone is going to take over, the work of their hands. So if you're looking at that, have you had a conversation with them? Where are they with regards to the epistemic injustices, that will be meted out when we introduce AI? How are they feeling? I mean, if you're thinking of, a moral outlook, who has a responsibility to explore that with them? Thank you.
Thanks, Tiki. And maybe we can also just get Benito's question, and then Samuel, you can offer your thoughts. Benito, you are on mute.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the chance to ask a question. Thank you very much, Dr. Ntapanta, for a very wonderful presentation. My quick one was, I was wondering, since you've done your studies in Tanzania, I was wondering if there are any existing legal frameworks regarding the single-use e-waste or disposable e-waste, especially on their disposal, because I'm worried of things like, for example, recently we've seen there is a very big rise on the use of the electronic cigarettes, for example, which most of the time you see people, they're basically, since they're single use, they just finish their use and then they just throw them away around. So I was wondering if the country has a legal framework regarding the disposal of this single-use kind of e-waste. But also, the second question is, what are the chances of using AI to develop models to address the question of e-waste, especially for the African countries? Thank you.
Thank you, Benito. Samuel, over to you.
Thanks. Really nice questions. Some are a bit challenging. I will try. So, what are the ethical vocabulary within if you use care and repair, and instead of optimization and all that? I think it's a really interesting question. And so my answer would be probably we really don't have to find a concept, a generic concept, rather than listening to the people. In this case, for example, informal e-waste workers, how do they think or look into their life words? And I think if I go back to the book, the concept gathering, and that's why I used on the title, was basically the reputation of my walimu, I call them my walimu, my teachers, how they were describing their work. So one way they were talking about kukusanya, to collect, but also kukusanyika. Kukusanya, kuokota, na kukusanyika. And this really actually aligned very well with the Ursula Le Guin, the career bag theory of fiction. When you want to tell stories that are not, the famous, the ubiquitous stories, and very mainly when I was doing this was during my PhD fieldwork, the story of e-waste in Africa was that of Ghana, of burning black borders, and the documentary Welcome to Sodom had just come out. So also I wanted, and the whole book tries to show the centrality of their labor, their thinking, their skills. So I kind of captured the terminology they were using and try to find a proper way in English. So I don't know. I don't know if I answer that. How the workers think of their work. Oh, that's a really difficult question. Because like everybody as workers have aspiration to a certain ways of laboring, and everybody has want to have that upward mobility and not working with waste. And I think the most in relation to the waste collectors and recyclers in Tanzania, actually in the book I have the whole chapter about this. They are actually regarded as really low class. Most of them are regarded as addicts and all that, thieves, that they are stealing infrastructure. Of course, that happens also. So most of them, they want this upward mobility, and they explained to me everyone had different ways. So one of the collectors who I worked a lot with, he was very young, in his early 20s. He just came to the city from the Tanzania inland, and for him was to collect enough to open or to become a scrap dealer. So scrap dealer is the middleman, where the collectors, after they collect, they dismantle, they separate all the metals, copper, iron, cast iron, aluminium, and then they will sell to these middlemen who are dealers, who then sell to big companies. So for him, this was an aspiration to get there. Tanzania legal framework. Oh yeah, that's a really good question. Tanzania e-waste is kind of patchy. The legal framework is very patchy. So first, it's included in the EMA, the Environmental Management Policy, I think of 1996. Not very well integrated, but also it's under the Vice President Office for the Environment. And in 2023, they wrote the e-waste regulations. So they are in place. However, it's a very shallow regulation. It focused more into collecting revenue from those who are doing businesses with the e-waste, and what they put the fees ridiculous high. So for a correction, or the collection as a scrap dealer, if you want to be formalized, you'll have to pay around 7 million a year, if I remember correct. So I think that's the weakness of the EU-West 2023 regulations. They focused more into correction of revenue, but also talking very abstract, as if we were collecting e-waste not in Dar es Salaam, maybe in Cape Town, something like that. So doesn't really reflect. It didn't include that much informal recyclers. Chances of developing AI to addressing e-waste, I think chances are, and this is, I think, predicting, because and I don't want to be technological deterministic here, but I look on AI more into as a technology of imagination. So it would depend how people incorporate in Tanzania, how they incorporate in their daily activities. However, and I mentioned a little bit, I think repairers might actually use more if these AI accelerators, very specifically on repairing, they might use more because they already learning to repair things from YouTube. They learn to repair things through trial and error. On the first slide, the second slide after the title, you can see this is one of my walim. He was leaking this pad, I think it was a Samsung pad, to figure out if there is power going through. So this is how. So I think with the AI, that can actually detect where the fault is, what kind of spare parts needed. I think it will be adopted widely by repairers. But then the problem is, we have seen the planned obsolescence, we have seen propriety by corporations. With these technologies actually be accessible to informal workers? That's another question. Thanks.
Thanks, Samuel. We've got a question from Angela. Let me just, Angela, you can unmute yourself and yeah.
Yeah, I came in the middle of the conversation, and this is something that is at the heart of what I want to know. So I've done a little bit of research in that, and I wanted to know whether this one might have been within your scope, but with the current kind of induction into AI and AI-driven tools, and the kind of trends where big companies that are building tools for AI, like Hello Tractor, John Deere's, which are companies that are already operating in Africa, where they want to control both the manufacturing, actually the whole cycle of the tool, from manufacturing, from designing to manufacturing to the end of life of this particular tool. So, which means they will be controlling the ownership of what we call reuse and recycle. So where do you see this going for those workers that depend on this particular business for recycle? For example, I've been seeing a lot of practices in the informality in Kenya and probably the wider East Africa, where we recycle some parts of cars and they are resold. But now I'm imagining a car comes and with a dealer who is willing to run the whole end cycle, in which we cannot be able to tinker this particular tool and all that, and every repair must go back to the manufacturer. Everything that must be done, otherwise it messes up with the whole system and all that. So where do we see us going in this kind of controlled business models, in terms of our workers losing and also us losing in terms of our pre-existing practices of collection, reuse, recycle, and repair?
This is a very wonderful question, and I think I can take it into two. I might not be able to address everything. Sorry, I jumped in before anybody else asked the question. So I think with the pre-existing knowledges, so I'll give example of EU before I go back. So in the EU, repairing is dead. The cost and time of repairing your broken screen on your iPhone sometimes is almost as equal as buying a new one. And this was exactly purposely created through licensing, propriety, and warranties. Warranties are notorious for doing this. That you buy your phone, you have a warrant. If you do something without them, then you lose your warrant. And this actually has I work here with these voluntary repairing cafes. They're all over Europe. When you go, there's the old guys who are volunteering there to repair. You don't see young people because this knowledge was not passed over, and that's my worry. If AI is actually, it's better if they put a proprietary that cannot be copied and used in Gikomba in Nairobi or in Dar es Salaam, because repairers in Dar es Salaam, the one I worked with, have this generational historical learning by trial, blockle kind of knowledge that is accumulative. So with AI, if it penetrates into the repairing, it means if repairers rely on manuals and a diagnosis that are easily identified by AI, we might also see the vanishing of these practices. And I'm not saying it's bad as far as if these technologies, for example, if they are open source, which now we are thinking, are they going to be open source? Are they going to be for subscriptions? So that's one. And two, the question about the big companies. Yes, and so in US recycling, you have a machine, for example, the one called Tombra Sorter. It's been developed by a company called Van Dyke in the Netherlands, and they have if there's a breakdown, they will send their technician to come and fix it. But I don't see that as for these big machinery like the tractors. Of course, it will cause the loss of in Swahili we call, for example, mafundi garage, those car technicians who have histories of repairing Land Rovers since it was not hydraulic until now, where it's completely integrated into AI and computerized. So yes, I think that is coming. We're going to lose some of the knowledges, my predictions, but also the power of humans to imagine technologies is also really powerful. So we cannot take that for granted. They might also, imagine otherwise than what we think. Thanks.
Thanks, Samuel. And thanks to everyone who's asked a question so far, or who's offered comments. We've just reached our allotted time slot. So I think if I can just offer two main takeaways. I mean, we approached Samuel with a broader interest in articulating as part of a research development program that is interested in articulating what an African agenda for the ethical questions posed by emerging technologies could look like. And this webinar is part of a series of webinars and other events and other activities where we bring scholars from Africa and beyond to leverage the African humanities to do that. And I will post, are extending sort of an invitation to scholars, to creatives, to practitioners to sort of help shape that research agenda through various funded opportunities like academic retreats, catalyst grants, and residencies. And so with that in mind, so, with this, the interest behind this webinar is articulating an Africa-centered research ethics agenda. So I think, there's a question of what's on the ethics agenda. Well, I think Samwel is part of an evolving conversation about centering the material legacies of AI. So thinking beyond design and deployment to a kind of ecological awareness and the infrastructures that sustain both physical infrastructures, but also human infrastructures that sustain AI. I know the emerging technologies, but then there's also where and who participates in ethics. Who do we center? And so, you're bringing attention to a particular class of workers in Tanzania and East Africa as important interlocutors in articulating this, listen, thinking about how AI, the kind of futures that it heralds for the continent, but also globally, but also, and by implication, geographically, where do we think ethics conversations happen, right? They don't only happen in academia, they don't only happen in policy circles, they don't only happen in the global north. So I think you're making many claims at once by virtue of the people you're talking to, where your conversations are taking place, and even the audience that you have in mind. So, Samuel, thank you so much for giving us your time. To the audience, thank you for giving us your time as well. And yes, please look out for other events and conversations that we have in future. Hope you all have a good morning, afternoon, day further, wherever you are. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank you,
Samuel.
Annie. Thank you.
Excellent.